Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Karma can be a bear. At least so we're told. But what if we could break out of karmic loops we feel bound to? What if the power to do so has been ours all along? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X Zone TV channel, xztv.ca. With us this hour to explore karma and freeing ourselves from it is Philip Goldberg. Philip has been studying the world's spiritual traditions for over 50 years as a practitioner, teacher, and writer. He's presented at numerous venues and authored several books, including American Veda, The Life of Yogananda, Spiritual Practice for Crazy Times, and the forthcoming Karmic Relief, Harnessing the Laws of Cause and Effect for a Joyful, Meaningful Life. He serves on the board of Association of Spiritual Integrity and publishes on his Practical Spirituality Substack, his website, philipgoldberg.com. Philip, thank you so much for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Thank you for having me, Gwilda. It's a pleasure.
So, Philip, you've been studying the world's traditions for over 50 years. What drew you to that area of study?
Well, I was young once, and it was the late 1960s, and I was discontent, searching for answers to important questions that my elders and the institutions of society at that time didn't answer satisfactorily. So in my search for truth, I was part of what we then called the counterculture, and everybody was on a similar quest. And in those days, long before anyone dreamed of an internet or anything like it, the medium of exchange for ideas were books. And so even though I was a student, I managed to read what I wanted to read instead of what I was assigned to read for the most part. And in that context, was turned on to books about the Eastern spiritual traditions, which I had not been exposed to. So I read about them by prominent Western authors like Aldous Huxley and Alan Watts and others. And then I read them directly. I read Buddhist sources and the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads. And it was life transforming for me. I had no religious upbringing. I thought religion was for fools. But this was different. This was a kind of approach to inner transformation and ways of connecting to the larger cosmos that seemed empirical and practical. Nobody asked me to believe any nonsense I found hard to believe. It was all based on experience and proven methodologies. And I was drawn to it like the proverbial fish to water. And it's shaped my life ever since.
So, how has the general public's relationship to ancient spiritual traditions changed since that time?
Well, I wrote, you mentioned one of my books, American Veda. That book chronicles how the spiritual teachings that were born in India and were maintained over the centuries found their way to the West, in particular America, going back a few hundred years. It was a gradual process. And then it exploded in the 1960s. during my youth, and began to permeate the culture in many ways. That's why I wrote about it. That book came out 15 years ago, and it's only more true now. It's not just the obvious yoga studios on every street corner and people, doctors and psychotherapists recommending meditation practices that were born in the East, and have many of which have been secularized for our intake. But it's also the way people understand spirituality and how they engage it in their lives. The fastest growing segment, cohort in studies on American religion over the last, 20 years or so, has been this category of spiritual but not religious, people who resist affiliating or labeling themselves in any one way, but want to be free to explore and bring into their own inner lives the traditions from other cultures.
So, Philip,
Fit in.
how much watering down and distortion have those traditions experienced as a result of becoming a little more mainstream, Western?
A lot, but yeah, and that's inevitable because people at different levels of development, different levels of understanding are drawn to these teachings, and there are people who want to make a buck in conveying them, and so there's commercial interest, and you don't lose money by watering things down. And so that happens. That's inevitable. But the remarkable thing is that so much of the authentic teachings are available, and people, if they want to, can find their way to it. Take yoga, for example. It's become synonymous with physical fitness, and that's a shame, because the real core of yoga tradition is spirituality and meditative experience.
And so
But
the
people find their way.
The physicality of yoga is it based or aiming towards being able to purify the physical so that they can bring the spiritual through?
Thank you very much. That is the original intent. The side effects, the fringe benefits, well, you're healthier and more fit, and those are not to be minimized. But the higher purpose was as preparation for deeper spiritual practice and purification, as you said. And people find their way to that if they're sincere seekers.
It seems diametrically opposed to the traditional religions of this country, where we're taught to disassociate from the physical because it's something bad.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in the tradition, but to be fair, there are elements of that in the East as well. But the understanding that the body is the temple of the soul, as we say in the West, and what Buddha called the vehicle for awakening, is embedded in the Eastern teachings, especially the yoga tradition, where care of the body and refinement of the physiology is part of a well-rounded spirituality.
So, what do you see as the impact of transmissions of Eastern philosophy and spiritual practices to the U.S.?
Well, as I said, it's transformed the landscape of spirituality in America. If you look at the surveys of how people's attitudes toward religion and spirituality, you see this growing trend of, one, spiritual independence, as opposed to being a member of something. People want to be in charge of their own spiritual lives. Second, an emphasis on inner experience as opposed to belief systems. People want to experience inner peace and expanded mind and bigger heart and all the benefits that come from the variety of spiritual practices that are available. And so spirituality as a means of personal growth and development has become part of the landscape, a high priority. And the role of dogma and belief systems has declined a great deal. There's a whole lot of people in churches and synagogues and mosques who are there for the experience and for the community, and don't necessarily believe all the doctrines that are being taught.
So, which gets us to, what is karma?
Well, I just wrote a whole book on that. Well, the simplest answer is the word karma means action. It's simple as that. The larger meaning of karma and the laws of karma are that every action has consequences. And not just any action, but every thought has consequences. And those consequences will eventually reverberate and affect the person who's performing the action. That is, we summarize that in the West by saying things like, we reap what we sow, and what goes around comes around. But the crucial thing is nothing stays localized when you understand karma. When you understand the universe, even from the perspective of modern physics, nothing stays local. Everything has an effect. Sometimes it's obvious. If you cut somebody off on the road, and they react to it, it's sort of instant karma. You eat the wrong food, you get a stomach ache, instant karma. These things we understand. Treat someone mean, there'll be, something will come back to you pretty quickly. But there's all the rest of the things we say and think and do every day. Everything gets thrown into the pond of karma and interacts with other things, and eventually comes back to us. Not just the bad stuff. Everybody thinks about karma, like you said in your introduction, using a polite word. Karma is a bear. It's often less polite. And people think of karma as, you do something wrong, it's going to come back to you. But you do something right, and that will come back to you. That part of karma is also, present and should be part of our calculations. But that's essentially what karma means.
So that's a pretty good definition. It's we're going to play with that on the other side of a station break, but it is time for that station break. Philip and I will return very shortly, so don't you go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Is the ancient concept of karma relative today? With us discussing the nature of karma is Philip Goldberg, the author of Karmic Relief, Harnessing the Laws of Cause and Effect for a Joyful, Meaningful Life. His website, philipgoldberg.com. So, Philip, we were talking about the definition of karma, and as you were going through it, it has me wondering, how does karma relate to the laws of nature? Is it directly related?
Yeah, in fact, a lot of people translating or presenting karma to the West will describe it as a law of nature. The laws of nature, as they've been discovered by physics and biology and chemistry and so forth, they are called laws of nature because they are orderly, they're predictable. They can be understood by our feeble minds. Karma is a lot more complex. It doesn't boil down to easy formulas the way, the science communicates. But if you understand it properly, it is at least analogous to a law of nature. It's one of the ways the universe operates. You could say it's the way the manifest created universe operates, and that the laws of science are embedded in the karmic sort of patterns of the way the universe is shaped. Every action has a consequence. Well, the laws of nature, as science described them, are sort of part of that. In physics, there's, one of the laws of physics is every action has an equal and opposite reaction. People will say that's exactly what human actions, as defined by karma, how they're defined by karma. So yes, it's at least analogous, if not, even if you don't accept that karma is a law of nature.
So, how does the Eastern concept of karma differ from that held in the West?
Well, we don't really have a concept of karma in the West. In the Western religious traditions, there are many attempts to explain why things happen, seemingly mysterious things. The question of why do good people suffer? Why do bad people not seem to get punished? This is, very old questions. This is, the book of Job is built around that one, that question. And there are many attempts to explain it in the West, given the Western religious framework of typically a God the Father who is the judge of all of our actions and so forth. And the religious traditions have never been able to explain why a God that is almighty, all powerful, all knowing, and all good can tolerate such a mess in human life. And so it's not been a satisfactory, it gets less and less satisfactory, the traditional religious responses. And that's one of the reasons why so many people in the West, not just New Age people and, naive seekers, but very sophisticated thinkers, are inclined to say karma might explain things better. The laws of karma, we can't prove them, but if they're true, the explanation holds up. It makes more sense. And so there's an inclination to incorporate karma into Western understanding of things.
It's like when we're trying to contemplate from the framework of an all-knowing, all-loving, all-controlling God, and people are puzzling over, okay, like you just said, why do bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people, in short? How much does that have to do with what you mentioned earlier, which is intriguing, that it's not just about what you do or say, it's about what you think or intend? So what apparently good people might have in denial, actually, bad thoughts and intentions. How much of this has to do with denial?
Well, it could have a lot to do with denial. And one of the forms denial might take is that there are consequences to our behavior. So people might get away with lying or cheating or fraud, thinking no one will ever know. They'll get away with it. But there's two things to be said about that. One, if karma is real, it'll come back to you, even if you seem to be getting away with it at first. Second, there are subtle consequences. And one of the ways that Western thinkers and often Eastern thinkers too talk about this is anybody with a conscience who engages in deceit or lying or cheating will be to some degree burdened by this. Unless you're a psychopath or a sociopath, there'll be a part of you that's either feeling a bit guilty about it or worried that you're going to get caught. And that worry is a consequence, and that can eat away at you. So there are subtle consequences to thoughts and actions, as well as, the physical, what occurs on the physical plane.
So, can we kind of gauge what kind of karma we may have been creating in denial by what's coming back at us that we're not happy with?
All we can say about that is whatever happens is the result of our thoughts and actions and words in the past. That means the good stuff. Something bad happens, we think, why did this happen to me? What did I do? Something good happens, we hardly ever think of it, but we should. We say, well, I did something in the past to deserve this. This is a good thing coming back to me. But the details, exactly what was done in the past, it may not be one thing. It may not be that, this thing that just happened to me, the car accident, the falling in love, whatever it is the result of one thing I did in the past. Now, it's much more complicated than that. And it's impossible. And the Indian spiritual texts are very clear on this. Don't waste your time trying to figure it out. Like, how did this happen? Why did this happen in the past? It's much too complicated. Similarly, you do something in the present, or you're about to, predicting exactly how that's going to come back to you in the future, our minds are incapable of this. This is way too complicated for us. But the principle that if you behave well, good things will happen in the future. If you behave inappropriately or in a immoral or unethical way, that the consequences of that will come back, not because somebody is going to either reward or punish you, but because there's laws in effect. And so actions will bring to you something similar, something in that category.
So, basically, it's just the way life works.
It's the way life works, but if you are conscious of it and you accept even the possibility that every action has consequences, it does change your thinking and the way you approach the world. Whereas if you dismiss it and say, there's no lawful stuff going on in the universe where I can get away with anything, well, then there are consequences. And so my bottom line is always, if you don't, it doesn't matter whether you believe in karma or not. I can't prove it to you. But if you lean in that direction, it's better to assume karma is real than to assume it's not. We'll have a better world if people think there are consequences to their actions.
So, you say the term karma is often misused. Would you please
Yeah.
explain that?
Well, there are many ways it's misused. And one of them is what I just said, I alluded to, thinking it's only the negative stuff. There's a lot of pop songs about karma. Taylor Swift has one, a lot of songs about it. And most of them are in you did me wrong, now karma's going to come and get you, But the good stuff is karma too. And we must understand that if karma is real, then everything that happens is the result of the past. And everything going forward is a result of what we will contribute to the karmic balance sheet at each moment. Another misconception is that, or misuse, is that karma sometimes is misinterpreted in ways that lead to complacency or irresponsible behavior. For example, something bad happens to somebody. I've heard this myself. People say, oh, well, it's their karma. It's obviously something they did in the past. And that gets the person off the hook by dismissing somebody else's suffering as, well, it's their karma. So my response to that is, yes, it's their karma. And your reaction to it is your karma. So if you are callous and indifferent to somebody's suffering, that has consequences. If, on the other hand, you're compassionate and kind toward the person who's suffering, that will have positive karmic consequences. So that's something, to be to be on guard about in this context.
So isn't taking that stance, although it must just be because of their karma, because they did something to deserve it, isn't taking that stance a form of denial? Ergo, it'll never happen to me.
Yes, it can be, and it's often rooted in a misunderstanding, but it's a cop-out, essentially, and you could say it's a form of denial, that the person in front of you who's suffering, or the person you hear about in the news, or you get an email about a friend, it's now your karma that information came to you. And how we react to that creates karma in the future. So every moment is not only a consequence of the past, it's creating the karma going forward.
Well, it's time for us to take a station break. On the other side of the break, though, I would really like to talk about karma in the future.
Okay.
Philip and I will be right back to continue our discussion, so you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Are there karma cops? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org, with us discussing karmic law as Philip Goldberg. His website, philipgoldberg.com. As promised, we've been talking about how the behavior or actions we've taken in the past creates the karma that we're living in the present. Can we go back from the present and shift the karma that we've built in the past, or can we go to the future and figure out what's going to go on and change our behavior in the present to change the future?
It sounds like science fiction, actually.
We're living it.
But in a sense, yes. Karma is not fatalism. It's not determinism. You're not a victim of karma. This is another misunderstanding. Karma places responsibility squarely on each of our shoulders. We're responsible for whatever happened in the past, or whatever we did in the past leading to this moment, or whatever's happening to us now. We are also responsible for how we respond to the situations in the present and what we do in the next instant and the next day and the next month that creates karma in the future. So can we go back into the past? No. Can we alter the karma that's coming to us before it even arrives? In a sense, yes. Let's look at it as an analogy. I didn't make this up. This is something I heard a guru once say, and it stuck with me. If you take out a loan, you borrow money, there are terms and conditions. The loan will come due at a certain date and time. Similarly, if whatever we do in each moment is like it's a debt, especially if it's a negative thing we do, it's a debt that will have to be paid. There's no contract that says when it's going to come back, but it will come back. The analogy to a loan is, suppose you have a loan that's coming due in a year. What you do in that year, from the time you take out the loan till the time it comes due, will determine the impact that the loan coming due is going to make to you. So if you just keep spending all your money and then suddenly the karma is due, or the loan is due, that's going to be a tough one. You don't have the money to cover it. If, on the other hand, you behave very responsibly and save your money, earn more money, then when the loan comes due, it's not a big deal. Similarly, we do something negative at some point in time, we can then say, oh, that's going to come back to me, and behave better going forward. So then when something negative comes into our lives, we have the strength and the capacity and the means. So the impact is not that great. So we can, in a sense, affect the past by behaving better in the present and in the future. Similarly, saying, can we look forward to the future and predict? No, but we can behave ethically, behave with kindness, be nice, as my grandmother used to tell me. And we can expect then good things happening to us in the future.
So, has the concept of karma ever been proven?
No, and I don't think it ever will be, unless, the physicists surprise us, sometime in the future. What we can say is proven is, and science is in the forefront of this, the basic karma couldn't be real if everything were not connected. But science has been very diligent in demonstrating at this moment in history that everything is connected. There's no doubt about that. Scientists will tell you that we don't understand everything in the universe, but we do know that everything is connected, and that everything that happens reverberates endlessly through the universe. In some places more powerfully, in some places negligibly, but everything is connected. The next step, I think, will be the proof that everything in thought and feelings is also connected, that consciousness is a substance, it almost like a substance that is universal. And therefore, what we think has consequences, not just in determining our actions, but thinking negatively about somebody is going to have an effect on that person. Having bad intentions, that brings us back, whether science proves it or not. But the nuances of karma are such that intention matters a great deal. And we know this intuitively. It's even in the laws. If you intentionally inflict harm to someone and you're arrested, your punishment is going to be greater than if you do something by accident, involuntarily. The laws of karma are like that. If you do something harmful with bad intent, the consequences are greater than if you're just careless or if you inadvertently do something.
Which brings me to my next question. So, now we can all be good and scared, because even if thoughts that go through our head can create negative karma. And I don't know of anybody that hasn't been driving down the road, been cut off, and have some negative thoughts going through their head.
Of course.
Can we
Of
go,
course.
take it away, take it away, take it away?
Well, yeah, you make up for it by thinking positive thoughts. And, one of the key factors to me in working with the laws of karma and creating a better karmic future for ourselves is developing a spiritual repertoire of practices that bring us a measure of inner peace and contentment, which is what meditative practices, yogic practices, mindfulness practices, prayer, all this whole repertoire that we have of spiritual practices, they're meant to change us internally. And the more we engage those on a regular basis, the more favorable our odds are of having a positive thought, of doing the kind thing, of being nice to somebody as opposed to angry or vindictive, because we're more content inside. It's an easy formula to understand because we've all experienced it. If we're tired and miserable, we're more likely to lose our tempers. We're more likely to be selfish. We're more likely to be unkind. If we're feeling content inside and happy, we're far more likely to be compassionate and nice to other people, even in thought. And so it comes to that. But yes, but the thing is, one things we want to avoid is, oh, I had this negative thought. Oh God, I'm terrible. It's going to come back and harm me, because those are bad thoughts too, right? Whereas, oh, I'm human. I had negative thoughts. I'll try to do better in the future. That's a kinder thing to do to yourself than to, feel guilty and shame. We're human. Let's just accept that humanness.
So if if we talk about the way nature works, sound, an equal but opposite sound wave will cancel out and create silence. So are you saying that if we are driving down the road and that proverbial truck cuts us off and we go into a negative place, if we stop and immediately think kind thoughts, can that kind of stop and nip it in the bud, if you
Yeah.
will?
And that's a very well-known yogic practice. It's also in Buddhist practice. Think positively. I mean, even cognitive psychologists and self-help authors will tell you that try to shift negative thought patterns into positive ones. But there are methods for doing that. And we have to be kind to ourselves. We can't necessarily instantaneously shift. I mean, if somebody does something nasty to you and you're angry, trying to shift to, oh, I love that person. Your subconscious is going to say, oh, you're full of it. It's not going to work.
The best I can do is admire the color of their pickup. Okay.
Yeah. Or that poor person must be,
Having a
very unhappy to have done that. Or just shift to something else that pleases you. Turn on a song you like. Something. Just get out of that wheel of negative thought as soon as you can. Shift the mind. And, that takes practice. And, we have to be patient with ourselves. But it is part of the ways of dealing with karma.
How much does it have to do with processing? So if we're living our day-to-day life and something triggers us, we're being triggered into past damage as often as not. So how important is processing?
It's important. And so we the more attentive we can be to how we respond to things. Earlier I said it makes no sense to try to go back and understand exactly what we did in the past to cause the present. At the same time, if we're experiencing the same kind of difficulties over and over again, then we see a pattern emerge. And then, as any good psychotherapist would do, it's like, what are you doing to bring this situation about? You keep repeating it. That's a way of looking.
Are those considered karmic loops?
Well, I would call it that. A psychotherapist would call it something else. But this is where there's a lot of interaction. You could say, yeah, karmic loop is a good term for it. You're repeating the same mistakes. One of the things I like about the theory of karma is it's an educational model as opposed to a judicial model. It's not like there's, as you put it, karmic cops, keeping an eye on us, like, karmic police state. And it's not like there's a judge who's going to say, okay, you get this reward for that punishment for that. That's a kind of legalistic way of looking at things, that it's not an accurate way of thinking about karma. Karma is more of an educational model. You do things, consequences happen, situations repeat themselves. You now have a chance to pass the test. Part of karma is whatever happens to us is there to teach us something in our spiritual growth, in our evolution, to use the word that's in the title of your program. As we evolve, we should be learning and growing. And karma is a way of reminding us of our lesson plan. This is your curriculum.
We're going to have to check into the curriculum on the other side of a station break. Please stay with us as Philip and I continue to explore the modern day impact of karma. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. If we did it in a past life, can we be held accountable today? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Philip Goldberg. His website, philipgoldberg.com. Philip, let's dive into past lives. I mean, some people believe in them, some people don't.
I was wondering when you'd get to that.
The last quarter is a good place. So where does the concept of reincarnation interface with that of karma?
I think it's kind of indispensable, and it's a place of resistance to many people when it comes to accepting the laws of karma. But personally, I don't see any way to make the theory of karma really work if we only have one life, because the evidence is, as we all have seen, good people, terrible things can happen to good people, and good people suffer and die young, and suffer grievous loss and illness. And a lot of bad people, at least on the surface, thrive. They have comfortable lives. They live well. They're healthy. They live long. So if we're confined to this one life, it's very hard to justify the belief that everything that happens has consequences, and that whatever happens is the result of the past. What did that child do to,
But have we built up past lives as a way to substantiate karma when indeed karma may not exist?
Well, let's assume it does. If it does, then one way of explaining things is the existence of past and future lives. And that's where the educational model comes in. We have lessons to learn. We learn some, we don't learn others. We come back. We matriculate to the next grade. We come back. We have a new curriculum. And some of the courses we have to repeat because we didn't do well on them in the past. So that makes karma a very long-term proposition. And it means that, yes, some of what happens in this life, there's different forms of karma according to the Eastern sages. I won't go into all of them, but one form is that which comes from previous lives that are going to come due in this life. They're going to the effects of those past actions will come in this life. Then it's up to us in the present to respond to them. We can't know, despite what some people will tell you, we can't know, oh, this is happening to me now because in, the Middle Ages, I was a monk and this, I did this and I had an affair with a nun. We don't know. We can't go back. We can't even go back into our childhoods and understand everything, let alone past lives. But
which brings me to my next question. Most of us have no memories of our past lives,
yeah.
And some of our karma is accumulated in past lives. How can we hope to correct it?
Because we correct everything in the present. We act in the present, wherever the causes were in the past. This is happening now. How I react to it matters. What I do going forward in this regard matters. That's where the correcting is done. We can't change the past. It's there. So one of the things that is important to us is accepting the present and not laboring too hard over why is this happening? Why is this happening? What did I do to deserve this? Right here and now, this is it. This is the lesson plan. Are you going to learn the right lessons, make the right changes in your thinking, in your actions, in your interactions with others, so that the karma in the future changes? The details are not as relevant.
So, what's the best way to deal with difficulties in this lifetime if they're the result of past karma?
As I said, by doing the right thing now. And one of the reactions to that we should get in the habit of having is, instead of being angry about whatever is happening, instead of endlessly trying to figure it out. I mean, a certain amount of that is obviously natural and not to be discounted. But at a certain point, you have to say, okay, what can I learn from this? What is the real lesson here? And how can I do things differently in the future? That's the question. What can I learn from this? As opposed to, why is this happening?
Well, why is this happening is pretty much a victim stance, isn't it? And it seems like
Yeah,
we kind of like that place. Okay.
can be.
Why is this happening to me?
Yes, that's the tone that becomes victim. Whereas you say, okay, why is this happening? What kind of things have I done in the past to cause this now? What can I learn? That can be a legitimate and useful thing.
Well, one's taking responsibility and the other one is not. Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it seems like we've been encouraged, probably through guilt and conditioning from the dogma that we've been exposed to. We've conditioned to avoid responsibility at all costs, because if we take responsibility, that seems to be the same as being guilty of something. How can a person discover that that's indeed where they're coming from, and how can they correct that?
It's one of the lessons everybody learns, whether they believe in karma or not. At a certain point in our lives, we have to take responsibility for what happens. I mean, every child has to learn that. Every adolescent has to learn that. And sad to say, many middle-aged and senior has to learn that. We're responsible for our actions. It's as simple as that. And we either accept that or go through life feeling like a victim. And don't forget, if we don't take responsibility, we also don't get to give ourselves credit for the good stuff.
Nor can we correct the situation that's creating it in the first place, right?
That's right.
If we're in the powerless stance of victim.
That's right.
So if everyone were to start to recognize, or at least a majority of the people in the West were to start recognize the consequences or the principles of karma, how do you think that would change the landscape of our society?
You know, I gave a lot of thought to this, and it's tempting to say, oh, if everybody believed in karma, we'd have such a great world. But belief in something is not enough. It helps. I think people who believe in karma start to favor good actions, favor moral and ethical reactions and behavior in accordance with, the sort of principles we all accept for righteousness and goodness. And it's true. I mean, I can see in my own life, when I remember, oh yeah, karma, I'm much more likely to not take the shortcut with someone, to be kind, to say the nice thing, to give a bigger tip in a restaurant. I mean, it's little things like that. And I think a widespread acceptance of karma would have a big impact. At the same time, I'm very aware that every religious tradition, every secular tradition of ethics has proper behavior and improper behavior. And we're all raised in that. The jails are filled with people who went to church or synagogue every week and were taught and maybe even believed to, this is the right way to behave. But there are forces that make people do things they know are wrong. And that has to be attended to, as well as just whether we believe in something. I could see, I've seen people who believe in karma do bad things. And you say, don't they know? Why are they doing this? They talk about karma and they're taking advantage of people. Why? Because there are psychological forces, physical forces that we also have to attend to.
So some say that these times herald the end of karma. What's your take on that?
Karma will end when the universe ends. Karma is, there's no end of karma. As long as, what people mean by that is, I think, maybe they mean the extinction of the earth and all of the sentient beings but if the universe operates in accord with the laws of karma, then karma is always going to exist as long as there's a created world. And as long as there are human beings, the human aspect of karma and the consequences of our actions will be intact. The other way of looking at it is, in those traditions that talk about karma, they also talk about advanced states of development, of awareness. We call it enlightenment, we call it liberation, we call it awakening, that transcend the laws of karma. They transcend cause and effect. They station us in the eternal, in the infinite, which is beyond karma. So individuals who attain those states and in a stable, permanent way are said to be beyond karma. At the same time, as long as they're in bodies, the bodies are subject to karma. Because, if it's thirsty, it has to drink. And if it gets an infection, it's going to, have a wound or whatever. So karma is always going to exist on that level. But on the level of the person's awareness and consciousness, there is said to be states beyond karma. And then the body in action is directed from that level instead of the level of need and lack and so forth.
So that's definitely evolutionary, isn't it?
It's evolutionary.
Well, unfortunately, Philip, this has been a wonderful conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and we're out of time. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's been a great pleasure, Gwilda. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Our guest this hour has been Philip Goldberg, the author of Karmic Relief, Harnessing the Laws of Cause and Effect for a Joyful, Meaningful Life. To find out more about Philip, where you can find his books and all he has to offer, visit his website, philipgoldberg.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy past archived episodes, visit our website, www.missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join us again right here on the X-Zone TV channel, xztv.ca, where this mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to our rapidly evolving world.